Welcome to our new live stream series, Leading with Every Action, hosted by Every Action. We will be interviewing industry experts to discuss very important topics that are facing nonprofit leaders right now. Our first series is focused on equitable and inclusive leadership. This will be a three-part series happening over the next few weeks, every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, and we're kicking it off by discussing integrating equity into your organization. I'm Jamie Muller, she, her are my pronouns. I'm Senior Director of Partnerships at Every Action. I'm lucky enough to work with agencies, consultants, and other technology providers who support the nonprofit industry's needs. I'm also a former nonprofit leader myself, a social worker by trade. And so the topics we're covering today are near and dear to my heart and also the hearts of our guests. And so to discuss this exciting topic, I'd first like to introduce Jodi Segal, Principal of Big Change Consulting. She has been helping nonprofits start up, gear up, and clean up their operations, HR, and fundraising for over 25 years. And with her today is Courtnee Carrigan, the CEO of Raising the Bar Performance Group. Courtnee has proven expertise as a nonprofit leader and strategic facilitator of diversity and inclusion initiatives for over the last 15 years. And I cannot wait to hear from both of you on this extremely important topic. And Courtnee, I'd like to start off with you and ask you a very important question that I know is can be very confusing sometimes to folks, but could you just briefly explain what the difference is between equity and equality?
Yes, well, thank you, Jamie. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to be here, and thank you for everyone who took time out of your day to join us. We know that we are in a very busy season of life. So the difference between equality and equity. So while both are all about fairness, let's emphasize that both are about fairness. Equality means that you are giving everybody the same resources. And that's historically what we talk about and what we have done. When all of this started in 2020, you heard everybody talk about equality, equality, equality. Well, equality is ultimately where we want to be, and that's great. But we need to do equity in order to get to equality. And so equity really does recognize that each person has different circumstances and that they need different things allocated to them, different resources, different opportunities in order for them to have an equitable outcome. So equality, give everybody the same resources. Everybody gets a pair of shoes. That's equality. Equity, everybody can have a pair of shoe that fits. What size is it? What do they need for their arch fit? What do they need so that they can successfully be able to walk straight without pain? That's what equity starts to do, is to get to that, to drill down to get to that. Essentially levels the playing field. In order to have equality, we have to understand equity and make sure that each person has the resources and opportunities that's needed for them to have the particular outcome we want for all, whatever that outcome is.
Thank you. That was very helpful. And I like the example that you use. That's really, really important. And so when you're thinking about the operations of a nonprofit, what does equity in your organization have to do with operations? How do the two merge together? Courtnee, I think that's for you.
You're going to start with me first. Okay, so yeah, if you are going to merge the two, and if you actually want to start to integrate equity, right? I would do the whole reason why we're here, and many of you will see the blog post. There's this really cool equity workbook that Jodi has created that is where I would start. So in my work, in my lane of doing DEI strategy work, I start with strategizing, normalizing, and operationalizing. And so strategizing is sitting back, seeing a big picture, thinking about where we want to go, what we want to do, thinking about our individual bias, some bias that may exist in layers of the organization. What does that look like? And then we start to really normalize this conversation, create a space of what I like to call psychological safety. Our workforces are so used to us talking about it that they don't see us doing it. So we should create a space where they actually see, okay, we have a strategy. We need your help with that strategy. Let's talk about how we get there. And when you start to operationalize, which is my third layer, then this handbook, using the equity handbook, I believe is a start. It'll get you looking at hiring practices. It'll get you looking at pay. It'll get you looking at creating the atmosphere for employees to have equitable outcomes. And that is different than traditionally saying it's a culture fit, but actually let's add to our culture by bringing in somebody. So how we integrate, normalize, strategize, operationalize a tool that will help you get there to that integration, I believe is the equity handbook that Jodi has created for us.
Jodi, anything to add in to that?
I mean, Courtney's answer is great. As somebody who sat kind of inside organizations doing the operations, HR, fundraising, not necessarily the person who's out delivering the programs, I think it's really important to connect those parts together, because as we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you hear a lot about it being part of the program work that an organization does, but not necessarily part of the day-to-day operating and how you do your budgets, how you do your HR, how you work with your employees, and how you allocate different resources internally. So I think it's, Courtney talks about starting internally before you go externally. And I think that that's a really smart way to do it, because you can't really embody these goals and live into these values if you're not practicing it yourself first.
Yeah, so true. But what are the concepts for beginning the work to update an employee handbook, for instance, as a way of demonstrating your ability to, integrate equity into operations?
Yeah, an employee handbook is one of the many places where employees and employer relationships come together and where it's laid out. So when you have this opportunity to really set a tone with employees, that's one of partnership, respect, and trust, along with covering the bases with the legal requirements, et cetera, then you can really do some good work here. So we lay out a few different lenses in this training and with this framework that can be used to cover your policies and your approach to staff relations, that can be used in your employee handbook and as you're working together. And so here are the three different frames that we talk about. And the reason to think in terms of framework is because, even if you use a model handbook or you work with somebody like me or Courtney, you're not going to address every single possible situation in that template. You want to be able to have a perspective that you can use to embody these important values. So here are the three lenses to think about. So one is supporting a diversity of perspectives. So diversity doesn't mean just assembling people in a room and then you're done. It means bringing in different perspectives. Your programs, staffing, leadership, fundraising, they're all strengthened when they are well-rounded. Your HR and operations need to support diversity both in thinking and in approach. And so the staff and leadership in particular need to adopt a growth mindset where you look at challenges and changes as opportunities. You seek feedback because you want to learn and take perspectives into account. So if your systems and approaches are checkbox oriented, you want to get things done and make people think they've been included, or if you get defensive when someone makes a suggestion or a change, you might not have that growth mindset, and your policies are likely not going to support your goals for diversity, equity, and inclusion. You want to reward sharing of opinions, creativity, and rethinking how things have been done. But of course, you need to do that within the reality of your organization. You might have time constraints, budget constraints, mission priorities. So finding that balance is something that's a daily practice. And it's better to be thinking proactively about this than to try to integrate new perspectives when you're up against a deadline or something really urgent and high profile is happening. So then number two is to compensate people for their time and their resources. And we all know that it's an understatement to say that most nonprofits, and I'd put political campaigns in there as well, are tight on money. We have to be smart stewards of our funding and missions as well. So we need to both be careful with our spending, but not be penny wise and pound foolish. And one important way this plays out is asking staff to subsidize their employment. So if you're thoughtful about your technology and incidental costs, that's really helpful. Are you requiring staff to bring their own computer and phone? Do you provide internet and cell access? So if they have to do it, then they might need tech support, they might need new devices, they might need upgraded internet service, and these all take time and money that the organization should pay. If you have less income, you're going to be more impacted by these kinds of costs, where a more highly compensated person or someone with other financial resources, they might not notice it. Same goes for driving, office supplies, and incidental costs that might come up. And then the third lens is to be clear about decision making and roles. So I like to think about this like the old boys network. So if you're not invited to the place where decisions are made, or you don't know how leadership thinks about things, or it's really, then it becomes like hard to be heard. You have difficulty impacting decision making because you're not there where the decisions are made, and the deciders might not know you. It's harder to get opportunities or to exert independence. So a way to counter this is to be really clear about who's responsible for what, how decisions will be made, and how people can participate. To have diverse voices being heard, there has to be some type of level playing field for discussion and decisions. Power is not going to be shared if only the same people are in the room. So new people or people with different perspectives and experiences, they're likely not going to stay in your organization if it's a constant uphill battle to participate and to contribute.
Yeah, and so here's the thing, everybody, that Jodi's touching on. You don't have to boil the ocean. This is with all of our clients, we do a continuous improvement model. And some of the principles we use is that, as Jodi just alluded to, utilize your talent, bring employees in, let their ideas be a part of this framework of making this handbook happen. And then while DEI, for where we sit, we know that DEI is a huge change, just a paradigm shift if we actually are doing it correctly and how we have historically operated. So think about if this is such a big change that we're going through, what are these small, everyday, practical, continuous improvements that can be made that can create this equitable and this inclusive workforce that we talk about, but our employees are saying, I don't see. That, to me, is what I hear Jodi talk about when she walks us through how to look at it from those three lenses.
Thank you. That was so helpful and so illustrative too. And I think those are some really critical, tangible pieces that people can grasp onto. And Courtnee, you're so right. We've heard over the past, I think we've all seen and heard a lot about how, especially in the light of the pandemic, a lot of things just came to the forefront that really put a spotlight on the inequitable practices that were inside our organizations and just everyday society, right? And a lot of people felt moved to say they wanted to be more equitable and inclusive in their practices, but then it was like, okay, hello.
We're done with that. What's the next shiny penny we can go to? Squirrel.
Yeah, right. And everybody, I think that a lot of folks have very good intentions. I bet every leader that is working in a nonprofit has those intentions. We wouldn't be working in nonprofits if we didn't have intentions like that. But taking words and putting them into practice can be so much harder to do, especially when you're responsible for keeping an organization afloat during a pandemic and bringing in the money and hiring the staff and keeping staff happy. But then, circling back to it, this is a way to keep staff happy, right? And so it is something that does end up having to be prioritized. So my next question for, I think, both of you are, What are the top tips you have for improving equity within an employee handbook or general operations that folks can take the first step to do? You said not to boil the ocean. So how can we put it on a simmer?
Jody,
Yeah,
you start.
that's a great visual. I like that description. So the tool that you can download on the website is a self-assessment that's got 45 different things that you can assess. And so it can show you um, different places that you're really strong, which is great, and different places where you might want to pay some more attention so you can set some priorities. But I've pulled out a few of those items that are really important that you could focus on if you wanted to just kind of look at the highlights or see where you might get started. So number one is separating paid time off into sick and vacation pools or buckets. So some organizations put their paid time off or PTO all in one pool and allow employees to decide how to use that time. Other employers will split it out so you've got vacation separate from sick time and maybe other pools. I encourage you to separate it into those different groups. So let me kind of spell this out a little bit. If you have sick and vacation mixed together, someone's going to really think, is it worth me taking this time off when I don't feel great? Because I could use that for vacation. That person might come to work sick. They might be near other staff or clients. They might make other people sick. Their performance might be compromised. And they might stay sick longer if they don't stay home and rest. So imagine then that there's a single parent or you've got an older family member that you support. Your responsibilities are likely to fall a little bit heavier. And so that's more likely to be women and people of color. And if you're in that situation, you might be working hard for your employer and then coming home to support your family. You need a break, but you've burned through your PTO caring for family members. We really need to think about what Courtney started the conversation with, the difference between equity and equality, and what are the different tools that are needed by different people to make sure that we can be successful employees. And so some people need more space in one area or another so they can actually take a break. This is actually a potential cost saving for the organization as well, not only because you're likely to retain employees that are valuable and it's expensive and difficult to replace them, but if an employee leaves and you've got combined paid time off, then you probably need to pay out all of what has been accrued and earned before they leave, when they leave. If you have vacations separate, then the funds that will be contributed or paid to the employee when they leave will just be from that vacation bucket. So number two is to be generous in paid time off. A lot of organizations can't afford to give the kinds of salaries that they want and that the staff deserve and the board and the leadership want to give. Giving 2 weeks off plus holidays is just not enough if you have to take care of other people or recharge your batteries because you're doing really difficult mission work. And that is especially going to weigh on people without extra resources like extra money or family members that have the ability to help take care of kids or others. Number three is to include salary ranges and job postings. And this is actually becoming an expected practice to post the salary range for jobs when you advertise them. This ensures that candidates are not wasting their time applying for positions they would never accept. It's also great for employers because it will save time as you go through resumes and interviewing candidates who actually wouldn't accept the job anyway. And then on the flip side, if it's a well-paying job or more than expected, you might attract some really great candidates who might not have thought that it would be a good opportunity or a good fit for them. Number four is to create a job charter to define work lanes. And this is a really unique model that goes through more than a job description does. So it defines who does what your decision-making authority is, where you can weigh in, and what metrics your performance will be judged by. And you can eliminate a lot of confusion by knowing who's going to weigh in, who will lead, who has shared responsibility for a variety of areas. I have found it to be an invaluable tool and really eliminates and clears up some confusion. And then finally, number five is to use a hiring rubric. And then a rubric is, it lists experiences, certifications, and abilities, whatever attributes you want someone to have in your new hire. So when you create this guide, it's really helpful to crystallize what's important to prioritize in your interviews. It can shape your interview questions, can even shape what you put in the job posting. And it helps you avoid hiring people who are similar to you just because you like them. Oh, this person seems to get me. I think we'd work well together. Well, then if you hire with that kind of perspective, you can end up with an entire organization of people that are similar thinkers with similar backgrounds. And then once you do your rubric, you go through your interviews, then the different folks who are interviewing can get together, compare notes and scores so that you can see who really did shine in the interview as potentially a great hire for you.
Those are great tips. Courtney, did you have anything to add?
No, I think what Jodi is speaking to is exactly right. And of course, I agree with what she's saying. Your DEI, the DEI research and the data that we know for some of our organizations actually speak to everything that Jodi is talking about. So when you think about how employees want to work, we are getting a lot of that. We're getting a lot of that data and research. I mean, you can open up any publication and see a current article that has come out about that. When we talk about understanding and creating equitable environments, look at your internal data. Look at what employees are asking for and what employees need, and then utilize that, the handbook, to help you actually start to build out that infrastructure, to actually build out those particular workspaces. So DEI research is going to help you, and there's tons of it coming out right now today. And then looking at your own data in your workforce, that will inform you about some of the how to navigate some of the tips that Jodi just shared with us.
Great suggestions. So I know we've promised our audience we were going to wrap up within 30 minutes. Well, I said 20 to 30 minutes, because this is such a fun and important topic that I feel like we could just spend a lot longer on this. But these are important people that need to get to doing a lot of these important things that we talked about on this call. So we're not going to waste too much of their time any further. But I did want to ask a couple of things. One is, I see some chats, and Jodi, thank you for addressing those. I see some people are really interested in seeing what a job charter looks like and making sure that they caught all those tips that have been given out by Courtney and you today. So thank you for addressing that. But if anyone needs those resources, we are linking to the website where you can connect with Jodi and Courtney in order to get that information. And then if you have any additional questions, we would like to answer those. So you can use the Q&A functionality that's at the bottom, or just chat the questions and we are happy to answer those. And while you're thinking of the question you want to answer or ask, Courtney and Jodi, could you tell us, how can, and I'm going to combine our last two questions together, how can organizations get help with work on this, since it can be so overwhelming to figure out how to bring equity into the operations and employee handbooks and all the systems that make our organizations function? And then maybe you could also address at that time how folks that are attending this webinar can connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the first things I would do is what Courtney said about utilizing your staff. There are great opportunities to involve folks in these different practices and conversations. And because we're talking about internal operations in this particular conversation, it's an opportunity to think about staff who might not usually get to play a leadership role. So you may have internal staff that aren't programmatic leaders that will have some really great ideas on diversity, equity, and inclusion. When you want resources, referrals, assessments, or to dig deeper, it might be a conversation that could be a few minutes long, or it could be some place that there's a good fit for a partnership with somebody like Courtney or me. So please feel free to reach out, and I am happy to provide referrals, resources, etc. Connect you to Courtney if there's work there on DEI strategy. And between us, we've got really comprehensive practices and resources for organizations on general nonprofit work, political operations, DEI, and the intersection of those. So feel free to go to the Contact Us page of our websites. Mine is bigchange.llc, and Courtney's is Raising the Bar PG for Performance Group, raisingthebarpg.com to ask questions or request a meeting, and we can take it from there.
And we are all about time around here, so let me be clear. Jodi has already put, and thank you everyone for putting it in the chat box. Jodi's link is already in the chat box. If you are interested and want to have follow-up conversations with either one of us, simply go to her contact page and she will field. She will send people who are maybe asking a question that she'll say, oh, Courtney you should talk to Courtney about this. She'll do that. We do it all the time in Central Ohio. We're pretty good at this. So we're good. I have trust that we will do this, but to make it easier for everyone on this call, because we know there's a lot going on, just go to Jodi's page, put in there what you need, and then we will follow up with you.
Thank you. Okay, so I have a few housekeeping items. And first of all, I want to thank Courtney and Jodi for sharing their insights. And thank you all for joining this live stream today. I hope we were able to get to help you all begin evaluating your organizations and the journey you need to take to become more equitable and inclusive leaders at your organizations. Like Courtney said, there are links in the description and chats if you're joining on YouTube live as well, and also on our registration page. And then in addition to that, we will be emailing anyone that did register through Every Action the recording as well. But you can look it up on YouTube anytime you want following this live stream, and share it with your colleagues as well. And like I said, this is only part one of our Equitable and Inclusive Leadership series. So we would love for you to come back here next Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern. You can, if you've registered, we will send you the link to that. If you haven't, you can find us on YouTube Live as well. And next week, we're going to be talking about how accessibility design can benefit nonprofits, and that's going to be with Firefly Partners. So that's really going to be focused on your external supporters and how accessible you're making your organization to everyone. And then the following week, we're going to be talking about leading the way equitably and inclusively, and that's with Manal Biopa of Brevity and Wit. And we are going to be giving away some of her latest book that she just published as well. So if you join us, you might get to take home a book. Anyway, that's all we're going to talk about today. Jodi and Courtney, this was amazing. Thank you so much for your time and your passion and your wisdom on this subject. It is such an important topic of conversation. And audience, thank you to you as well for taking steps to create a more equitable environment for your employees in your organization today. That really is the first tool and tip that we need, are leaders that are willing to spend the time to think about this issue and put these practices into their organizations. Thank you all. Have a great weekend and look forward to seeing you next Friday.
And thanks to Every Action for hosting.
Thank you. Thank you.